Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Episode. Today I got a fun and random episode for you guys this Friday because recently my comment section has been pretty much filled up with people asking about the MARS FPGA project. So I figured enough people asked about it, I should probably talk about it. Generally, I don't really do videos on things that don't yet exist. I love showing you guys stuff on my table and taking it apart, but we are not there yet. But honestly, the MARS Twitter has been showing a lot of different commercials from old hardware back in the day, things like Dreamcast, Naomi, the Capcom CPS-3, games that you definitely know and remember, and that has been a lot of the hype train on their Twitter, showing all of those different commercials off, talking about what's going to be coming to MARS theoretically in the future. But definitely the biggest one I think that everyone keeps asking me about is a Dreamcast FPGA core with the potential for a Naomi implementation down the line. Because while the hardware is similar, it does have some differences, and I did go over those in a previous video. But one of the developers that's working on this, Fixel, I've known him for a very long time, good person in my book, is working on the Dreamcast and has talked about already implementing an SH4 core in some form of code. And if you don't know what the SH4 chip is, that is the processor at the heart of the Dreamcast. That is a Hitachi chip, so that's going to be running basically all of the code. So that's one of the two most important chips to get over to FPGA. Obviously you have the PowerVR chip as well. But as similar as the Sega Dreamcast and Naomi are, they do function in completely different ways, and they do have different implementations and slight hardware changes that would need to be dealt with on something like that. So when you guys ask me if Naomi is going to be running on the MARS FPGA board, I mean, I would presume if they have the code and they can get it done, it should be totally fine. I mean, if you take a look at the specs for the Dreamcast here, they are very similar. You got the Hitachi SH4 at 200 MHz, PowerVR 2 at 100 MHz, you have 720 megaflops of actual processing, and then you have the accoutrement of RAM there that you're going to be able to deal with when you're actually trying to run code either on the Dreamcast or on an FPGA device. But if we move over to something like Naomi, the specs do pivot a little bit, but at the heart of the hardware, they are very similar. It's going to be the same Hitachi SH4, it's going to be the same PowerVR 2, so those do share a lot of similarities, so I understand why they would be talking about both Dreamcast and Naomi at the same time. Now, as far as all of you guys asking me when this core would be out, I don't have the slightest clue whatsoever. I don't know if it's day one, I don't know if it's year one, I don't know if it's year three. I got nothing on that aspect. So when you're thinking about whether or not you want to jump in on MARS when it is available, you kind of have to answer to yourself, what is it that you want the hardware to do, and when do you want to do it? Because I know Naomi's been mentioned as an implementation in the future, so if you're looking for Sega Naomi now, maybe it's not the time. I don't have the answers to these questions, even though you guys keep asking them. Now, they also showed the IGS PGM, which is also a core that Hotego's mentioned bringing over to the MiSTer. This is basically the Neo Geo if the Neo Geo wasn't made by SNK, but was made by another company, IGS, out of China. This is the Chinese Neo Geo, and it is one of my favorite platforms of all time. Obviously, I'm making this video out of library assets, and I've done an entire series on this hardware. It is just absolutely incredible. Now, this is definitely something that can work on MARS and the FPGA chip they have on there. It's something that can work on MiSTer with the FPGA chip we already have on the DE10. This is just slightly more powerful than the Neo Geo, and it is something that could work on pretty much any decent modern FPGA that had enough logic elements involved in it. So this is definitely something that MARS has talked about having over on their platform, and I totally get that. It is nice to see that there is some PGM love out there, because I am constantly trying to hype this up as much as humanly possible as awesome hardware. It can be a little bit finicky to use in a real hardware format, but if you know my channel, you know I love my real hardware along with my FPGA fun. But the library on here is awesome, and I know it's been mentioned as coming to MiSTer. There's been some people working on it recently, but it's also been something teased to MARS. Now again, I don't know if this is going to be a day one thing, a 6-month thing, a year-long thing. All of that is still subject to change, and a lot of you guys keep asking if you're going to be able to play Dreamcast or CPS-3 or PGM when the board comes out. You're just going to have to honestly wait and see what gets announced, what gets shown off, because at this point in time, there is no test footage out there working on a MARS board that I am aware of. You're all watching my footage, my library content. That's kind of like how I make these videos with my own own assets for the most part. But PGM and FPGA would be an awesome time, and it's definitely something that has been teased out for Mars. So if it is a platform you're interested in, you have some options. Obviously, you can do real hardware. You could wait for the core to come to MiSTer FPGA. You could wait to see if it comes to Mars. You can do software emulation. You really have a ton of different options for PGM. And another question I've been getting asked a lot is about the 4K 60 output of the Mars board. It has been announced as a feature, so it would let you bypass your TV's internal upscaler. Honestly, my Samsung does an epic job of getting me to 4K from 1080p, but every TV varies, so maybe yours isn't doing a very good job of it. But there's also options out there like the RetroTink 4K coming soon, so getting to 4K is definitely a thing that people are getting more interested in. Now, CPS3 has definitely been shown and teased for Mars as well, and I know Hotego and his team are working on this board for MiSTer. They're right now just basically tracing out and pathing out all of the different silicon on the board, because while the CPS3 isn't the most complicated thing ever to come to MiSTer FPGA in the future, it is not a low-test board either. But this is something that Hotego is working on. I have no idea if that's who's working on it for Mars, but I know that there is FPGA work out there going on to get CPS3 over to MiSTer. But you 100% have to love fighting games if that's of interest to you. The CPS3, while that has some of the best fighting games from Capcom of all time on it, that is all you were getting out of that board. But moving back to Dreamcast and Naomi, this is the one that I get all of the questions about. And I absolutely love Naomi. I've got a Naomi 2, a NetBoot setup in the closet. I have the ability to play pretty much every Naomi game I could possibly want on real hardware. It is a ton of fun. But there's some games I own that I can't play, like Maze of the Kings here. It does use light guns and I haven't found them yet. So I would be interesting to hear what's going on with some of the implementations of that in the background when they get around to the Naomi section. But I've definitely used Fixel's products before. I did a setup guide for his FC1 optical disc emulator that I think he posted on his website, and he really does make a good thing, and I chat with him all the time. He is someone who knows what he is talking about when he's talking about hardware and technology, and I just recently sent my FM Towns Marty down to him because he was working on an optical disc emulator, so I shipped him off my console as well as a few games to test on that. I'm really looking forward to that product. It has nothing to do with Mars, but definitely the more you play the FM Towns Marty, the happier I am as a gamer and a channel. But I think maybe an FM Towns Marty would be a great core for either FPGA device. Hint hint, wink wink, can we please just get Marty already, or at least an FM Towns computer? I love this and I try to get everyone to play it who possibly can. But obviously it's still the question in the room about MiSTer and Mars. People are leaving me comments down below asking should they wait to buy Mars over a MiSTer, and honestly I have absolutely no idea. This is your money, it's your wallet, it's your decision making process. I talk about things that I can point to on camera and tell you whether or not I think they're worth it, so I have the ability to say this is great. Now if you want to get a MiSTer today and you don't want to go for the full stack but still want to be able to play everything, $303 is about what you need to spend. We're playing stuff like Nintendo 64 on the current core, and it is so much fun to see these real-time evolutions happening to MiSTer. There is definitely a ton of life left in the MiSTer FPGA project. It keeps surprising me every single time a new core is announced, released, worked on, previewed, anything like that. We're currently playing work in progress Sega Saturn cores, one of my favorite consoles of all time, and I think that the Saturn has been teased out for Mars as well, but it is something you can play on MiSTer FPGA today. And this is the thing, I don't really care what you guys decide to play on. If you're happy with something and you're playing video games, I am 100% happy for you. This channel is dedicated just to talking about what sort of retro gaming fun you can have and how you could possibly do it. And they have talked about day one ports of certain cores from MiSTer. You'll have to wait to see when day one actually comes here what does appear, but stuff like Neo Geo working on MiSTer will probably work on Mars if they port the core over as well. But Naomi stuff really does have me the most interested just because I've loved the Dreamcast, I've loved the Naomi, I've got a closet full of hardware that I can plug in and play, and I know a lot of people do like this generation as well. Still really curious about some of the special controls instances and how those would work, something like Lupin the Third the Shooting, or this game right here, Jambo Safari, absolutely awesome. A lot of the Naomi games do use interesting custom setups for their cabinets, so I would be interested to see how that could pivot into the future. But it's one of those things, Naomi is great, play it however you possibly want to. but this is usually on the outro where I show hardware in front of the camera. That way I have a little bit of a visual to lead you guys out of the video on. And the reality is MARS doesn't currently exist, not as something I can put in front of the camera, or many people can. So when you ask me in the comments down below, what is MARS and should you buy it? It's an FPGA board in development, and I have absolutely no idea. We will have to wait and see more. But trust me, once it's a thing, it'll show up on the channel and I'll be able to tell you more there. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Otherwise, happy Friday, go play some games. Bye bye.